Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness practice and hear their stories and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. So I'm really happy to introduce today's expert, Dr. Eric Bouwens. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Lucia.
It's so good to have you. For those of you that haven't met him yet, Dr. Eric Bouwens is a semi-retired family physician who's working in Grand Rapids, and he has spent a number of years working in immigrant communities, drug abuse treatment, and working class communities. His professional interests include the power of listening and education, cross-cultural medicine, prevention, diabetes, allergic disorders, and migraines. When out of the office, you're likely to find him hiking, biking, photographing, or playing with his grandchildren because I actually met Dr. Bouwens on one of his photographic expeditions this spring in Holland in the middle of the tulip fields. So he really does love that. And I'm just so glad that he's able to be with us today for this interview. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
I would love to hear from you. How is it that you got interested in this whole area of prevention, lifestyle, and health?
Well, I think that, we get a superficial introduction to prevention going into family medicine. And we talk the talk, and yet it's not working. We don't really make a huge difference in preventing diabetes. That's the sad truth that I feel like I've come to after 35 years. And so partially as a result of my encountering you in the field, I've taken a much deeper look into the prevention of diabetes. And because it runs in my family, and I even have some predilection to it and some prediabetes, I started to really study it very hard and start to preach the news to my patients about some more important changes they need to make in diet and exercise.
That's so interesting. So through both your professional experience in the clinics and working with patients, as well as some personal experiences kind of brought you to this place in your journey. And I love that you're willing to come and share while you're on the journey. Many of us are also on the journey, not at a destination, but always learning more about how to take care of these beautiful bodies that God made for us. As you work in your current semi-retired job, you see a lot of people with different cultural backgrounds, I understand. Tell me a little bit about what you've noticed and how these cultural issues impact health and chronic disease development.
Sure. Right now I'm working in a rural community that is about half white, lower income, a rural, underemployed community, and about half Mexican migrant worker.
Okay.
And the cultures are so different, completely different. But there's one thing in common, and that is, there's many things in common, but one of the things in common is that there's not necessarily a strong sense of wanting to be healthy, to work on being healthy, or that it requires change, or that something in their environment is not working for them to stay healthy. There's more of a sense that if I'm not really acutely sick, I must be well. Which is not true.
So it sounds like this is kind of tied up in the way maybe different cultures define the word health.
Yes.
How do you think some of these cultures you've been working with see health? Like when you mentioned, if I'm not sick, I must be well.
Yeah.
Any other things you've observed?
Well, I think that in my Mexican community, there's obviously there is a stronger feeling that my connection with my family is a really important part of my health. That, my sister lives next door. My mother is here. All of my brothers and sisters. I stay in connection with my community and, maybe my faith community, and I'm well. Of course, for many people who have to travel to find adequate income, then that means a really huge adjustment. That might mean I'm okay to work thousands of miles from home and not see my family, and just to be sure, just to know that they have food on the table. That's a tough jump.
Yeah.
But I see people with that every day.
Hmm.
And then there's other people who are do manage to come as families or eventually reconnect, and then at least they have their family, even if there's a lot of disconnect with the surrounding population. Like maybe there's a language uh, barrier, or there's
Hmm.
racism or whatever. But I think most people can adjust to that much better than being completely isolated from their families.
Yes, I agree that the social aspect is such a big part of health. In fact, in some cultures, the social relationships are actually more important than physical signs, symptoms, ailments. And if the social world is working well, then often the physical world manages, even if they're not paying a lot of
Yes.
attention to it, maybe aren't taking care of it well. But when the social breaks down, then you can always often see that the physical also breaks down. And I think
Yes.
we see more of that when people are isolated or at a distance from their families.
Well, the social
So
isolation, and
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the social isolation can disrupt many of the positive habits that we have. Maybe we had a history of eating our meals together as family and preparing meals from natural ingredients that are available at our local markets. Well, now that I'm living in an apartment by myself, I'm just getting frozen foods or junk food because I don't have the motivation to cook.
Mm. And I see that really across many different groups. They live on their own, they live by themselves, and they feel like there's no one they can contribute to through their cooking, and they can't be bothered to cook for just themselves. So they
Yes,
have been, eating out for years. And then that shows
yes,
up as physical challenges, diabetes, overweight, and all those sorts of things. It's
yes.
interesting, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, and one of those is social relationships. And I believe it's for a good reason. Sometimes, as Americans, we may not pay as much attention to it as some other cultures do, but understanding and learning from other cultures can help us wherever we happen to be, whatever group we happen to be a part of. So I appreciate you sharing that. In your work, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that people are up against as they're trying to prevent or reverse chronic health challenges like diabetes or overweight and those sorts of things?
I think they're not getting a clear message that their diet is important.
Mm,
And they may not even see the healthy foods that are available because the grocery store and the pharmacy and the little mini store next to the gas station are all full of processed foods and sugar.
mm,
And so many of them didn't grow up even with food education.
mhm.
So they're just, there's so many things against them learning how to work within their resources or within their communities to the degree they can. They just don't
Mhm.
have any information. And I think the medical profession has fallen so far short in educating people of how important that is.
And I think it's hard to educate if it's not part of the curriculum you went through originally to become a doctor, right?
Well, maybe we had, 2 hours of that and then
Yeah.
5 hours on, you know, something very obscure disease.
Right. So it's hardly a comprehensive approach to nutrition and lifestyle and its impact on disease, is it?
Yeah.
You know, I think another factor that comes in here is the living environments that different groups in our society find themselves in. I experienced that just last week. I was actually Yeah, that was last week. We had come into a big city here in Michigan, and we were in kind of a poorer section of the city. And I walked into a very common grocery store that we have in this state, which is Myers.
Yes.
And I looked in vain for some high quality produce, some things I just like. I needed to make some salad, and there was just hardly anything on the shelves. And the produce that was there was terrible. And it was not a very good variety or very good quality. And then it was, I went to the other side of town. I actually went to like northern Grand Rapids to the Rockland Meyer, and the walking into the store, you wouldn't know it was part of the same chain
That's right.
because the availability and variety and quality of food was so different. And I think we often we haven't figured out how to fix some of those problems. How do we make good quality food accessible to people no matter where they are living or no matter what their neighborhood happens to be? Any
And you would
thoughts?
and you would think that a chain store like Meijer could make a decision that this is important in every one of their stores. It's not the inner city liquor store. So either I know they price things differently in different sections of town. And apparently, from your observation, they also decide on lower quality and maybe lower price produce for the lower income areas.
And then I also wonder whether there are challenges, maybe even around staffing, like getting enough people to work in some sections that are qualified to actually like run a good produce department. And the resources may actually be very difficult for a store to find. So it's like I don't want to put like the blame on just like the corporation or any particular chain, but I think we do have a lot of complex factors that affect availability of both services and food for some of our more underserved communities. And I think understanding that and like doing what we can to improve that situation is always something worthwhile. What was your thought on that?
I agree. And I think there are some people making some efforts in that way in terms of farmers markets. They've been springing up. But we also have to realize we're up against a huge multi-billion-dollar corporate interest in promoting the addiction to sugar and processed foods.
Mm.
And we're at a disadvantage in that regard.
Recently, seems like I saw something where they were wanting labeling on some other addictive foods. It wasn't just tobacco. I was trying to think whether maybe it was caffeine, but it was saying that these companies are intentionally formulating their products to create addictions. And I don't know if you ever had a chance to read a book that came out some years ago by an author named Eric Schlosser. And he talked about the whole food corporation that we have controlling and manipulating so much of the food that is available to us in this country. I think the name of the book was Junk Food Nation. Oh, no, Fast Food Nation. That's what it was. Fast Food Nation. But he really dives into the chemistry behind creating food addictions, the over flavoring of things so that you want to come back for more. So it stimulates actually our nervous system to unnaturally high levels with sweet, salt, oily. It was fascinating.
Yeah. I did not read that specific book, but I have been reading a lot of similar, probably they would be friends of his. So, yes, I agree with that 100%. And it puts us those forces have very high resources to market and to perpetuate their dominance of the food system.
And it's showing up in our bodies. Like
Yes.
we are actually suffering those effects. I'm curious, as you've been diving into this a little bit more here recently, what are some of the favorite resources, books, documentaries? I'm not sure what you've been looking at, studies that you have found helpful in learning more about our choices and the choices we actually have around health.
Well, having been trained in a mainstream medical education, I, of course, have more confidence in somebody who's shared my training.
Hmm.
Because there are a lot of voices out there that have a very different educational background. They may be very valid, but I think the issue of trust, it would take me longer to come up to, really trusting them. So I don't know if you've run into Robert Lustig, who just
Hmm.
wrote the book Metabolical. But of course, he's a
Yes.
professor of pediatric endocrinology at UC San Francisco.
Yeah,
And
the
so,
UC San Francisco. Yeah. Hmm.
yes, so he is a pretty brilliant guy. And I just finished reading his book. And
Awesome.
I found it to be very powerful.
Mm.
Plus, he has
I think
many
another,
YouTube, he
yeah,
has
that's
many
great.
YouTube videos too.
Yeah, Doctor, is it Robert, right? It's his first
Robert
name, I
Lustig,
believe.
yeah.
Robert Lustwig. Yeah. Another one that I found really helpful is Dr. Michael Greger. Have you run into any of his materials?
Yes, I have run into him and not studied him carefully.
Yes. One of the things I appreciate about his books is that they're very well annotated. Like everything he says has a little footnote, and you can go back and look at the
Yeah,
studies.
yeah.
And he's very research based. His team is always looking at everything published in English in the area of nutrition and lifestyle every single year. So some of my favorites have been the audiobook versions of How Not to Die, where he talks about lifestyle and the 16 top killers in America,
Well,
or the How Not to Diet, which is looking at all of the major approaches to weight management and weight loss and pros and cons and the research on them. That was fascinating.
oh, that's good.
And yeah, he has a really good sense of humor. So if you're not into reading, his books are pretty thick, but they're easy to listen to because he's kind of funny and he reads them himself. He has this really dry sense of humor. And I think one of his newest books is How Not to Age.
Hmm.
So yes, all of them have been very, very good. I have not finished the How Not to Age one, but those are resources that I think some of our listeners may also appreciate looking into if you want to learn more for yourself around that connection between lifestyle and your choices for health, whether it's diabetes or some other chronic lifestyle disease that's killing hundreds of Americans every single day. These are some of the resources that can be helpful for you. Is there anything else you've come across that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I think it's important to find people to work with you who are interested and know something about prevention.
Mm-hmm.
Because um, I think in our standard medical mainstream, sometimes the emphasis is on medications, tests,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. So you really have to find somebody who can share your interest in being responsible for your own health and
Yeah.
who's willing to walk along that journey with you and show interest in and support because you need support to make changes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's really important. Sometimes when I'm talking to people, I talk about this three-step process for diabetes reversal. And I call it GPS to diabetes free land. Just like a map and now GPS help us get from point A to point B.
Mhm.
GPS is actually an acronym. The first one, G, for get a baseline. You need to know where you're starting. So, like getting an assessment that might include things like a lipid profile, what's your current A1C level, what are your biometrics, height, weight, BMI. Some of those things are part of like kind of a baseline database that you can use for tracking your improvement as well as knowing where you're starting and what your priority areas are. And I'll put a link to a free mini assessment you can use like that in the description below this video. And that's the first step. The
Yes.
second step is picking a destination, right? You have to plug it into your GPS. Where are you going? And often the assessment can give you some information about where your next stop is on your health journey. Do you need to focus on weight or your blood lipids, your sugars, or something else? And so that's step two, pick a destination. G, P, get an assessment. P, pick a destination. And S is set up a support system. And that is like, who's going to be on the journey with you? Who's going to guide you? Do you want to go fast? Do you want to go slow? So do you want a coach, or do you just want a friend that's going to check in with you and say, how are you doing, with eating better or exercising every day, or whatever it is that you've decided you're going to do to move along your pathway to your best health. So GPS is, I think, something that can help people to think through, what is the step I'm on and how do I go to the next one? When we pick the destination, we're talking about like goal setting and making specific goals. What do I want to accomplish over the next week so that I can reach maybe my long-term goal in a year? Where do I want to be? 50 pounds lighter, normal A1C, what have you. Yeah, so each of those steps can be so useful in optimizing your health and really enjoying what I like to say, enjoying the life that God designed you to enjoy, because he has a plan for your life and he has a design for it. And it's not to be sick. It's not to be, disabled and feeling like you're a burden or you can't contribute to society. So I love that, here you are past the active part of your career into a post-retirement, but you aren't necessarily slowing down. You are keeping busy, you are staying involved in life, enjoying hobbies, and still serving people. And I just think that's amazing. Do you have anything else that you would love to share with our audience that you think is really an important concept for them to take away? What's like a practical takeaway for them to think about as they might be pondering some of the things that we've shared today?
Well, along with getting support, I think you have to be a little bit kind to yourself if you fall back, or if you fall back into some old patterns. Like any addiction, when I've worked a lot in addiction, and I try to get people ready for the fact that even as much as they would like to say, I made this decision, I'm going to give up smoking forever and I'm clean forever, that to not be so distraught if they go back a little bit once in a while, that it's an ongoing process. And even if you decide to change your diet completely, it may take you a while to find alternatives, things that are satisfying, things that make you, and also to work out your relationships with your family, because they may not be eating this new things that you want to do. They may not share all of those commitments. And there's some negotiation that needs to go on. So I think even as much as, I'd like to follow a certain thing perfectly, we have to have a little flexibility to say, okay, I'm going to cheat a little because I got a birthday party and everybody in my family, my daughter made a cake for me. Okay, even though I don't want to eat sugar right now, I'm going to enjoy what my daughter did. This reaffirms my relationship with her. And so not make it so brittle that it just breaks. And then you say, well, I guess I can't do that. To expect that there's ongoing refinement and negotiation with family and friends.
I think it's really relevant because many people in the area of blood sugar control and diabetes reversal find themselves in addictive patterns. It might be addictive patterns of behavior. It might be certain addictive foods, as well as maybe other addictions chemically. So what you say, I think, is really true across the board. And understanding that the pathway to recovery from addiction is not a straight line. It's often a series of ups and downs, and we're simply looking for a trend that's moving away from the addiction to longer gaps maybe between lapses. And just remembering that it's a journey. You didn't get there overnight. You're not going to recover overnight. And that you have the option of tapping into spiritual resources as well. As I'm a Christian, I come from a Christian background. So I'm often, encouraging my clients to think about, God really wants us to enjoy good health. He has promises to give us strength, to give us courage, and he can help us in our journey to be successful because he has plans for us. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us today. And to all of you that are listening, I hope this has helped to help you think through maybe what are some of the cultural factors in your own life that might be impacting the choices you're making around health. Because no matter what your cultural background is, there is something there that's unique to your family group your larger maybe faith group or community group, wherever your memberships are, that impact these choices. And if you become aware of them, you have more control over them. And I want you to be empowered to take charge of your own health. Because remember, health is wealth, and it comes by choice, not by chance. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.